Greetings to all of you. It's our Red Sunday today, on a Sunday, the first. This is the second Sunday of January, 2022. We skipped the first Sunday to continue with our political discussion as part of our Red Sunday. Many comrades were visiting friends and relatives in their home states, so we thought they were not going to participate in our political study. As always, we try our best to be brief so that the comrades who are struggling with the data will be able to follow the discussion and participate in the comments. As we always say, that please write your comments. Let's continue with the discussion even after the live streaming is over. Today, we want to talk about the Gukurahundi. There is one Rutendo, Mr. Rutendo Matinyarare, who portrays himself in the media as a revolutionary, a Pan-Africanist, and an anti-imperialist cadre, which obviously is a lie, and we want to expose this. In one of his many videos that he recorded, he is asking the South African government, or is making a proposal that the South African government should pay something around 120 million, was it $1 million or billion? I can't remember. But there's a huge figure that he is proposing that the South African government must pay. He claims that the SADC states assisted South Africa during the struggle against the apartheid, and therefore its refusal to renew the Zimbabwe exemption permits, and also planning to deport advocate Simba Rutando Chitando. He will then ask or mobilize that such monies should be paid. He then claims, which is the basis of our video, he then claims that Gukurahundi was a war, a civil war, and he goes on to say the Zimbabwean government fought the imperialists in Matebeleland who were using Super ZAPU to prevent the struggle continuing in South Africa. So I want to expose this. He does not provide any evidence to his claims. We thought at some point that we should not give him attention. But if we do not respond to what he says, he continues with these lies, and the others might end up believing that what he says is the gospel truth, which is not the case. I am Mabuto Nicholas Mapena, General Secretary of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. Please like the video, circulate, write your comments, and subscribe. Amil Cabral, a great revolutionary, taught us, he says, and I quote, claim no easy victories, tell no lies, close quote. As revolutionaries, we should not in any time claim easy victories and tell lies. This is what Rutendo Mutinyarare seeks to do by claiming easy victories and telling lies. Lotinkom, an academic, writing his thesis in 2018, which he concluded in 2018, thesis titled Zimbabwe, South Africa, Interstate Relations between 1980 and 1999. This is what he writes, and I will quote. He says, nonetheless, Lee Krenge's remarks, Krenge was a minister in the South African apartheid regime. So this is what Lotinkomo says. He's an academic. That's his thesis for his PhD, which he wrote in 2018. Says, nonetheless, La Krenge's remarks instilled fear among the Zimbabweans, who immediately sent Wobe to address a press conference claiming that Zimbabwe harbored ANC military elements. He retaliated that most South Africans in Zimbabwe were refugees. Mugabe's own response was that it was mischievous of the apartheid regime to pretend, the court by Mugabe, to pretend that they thought there were bases in Zimbabwe, because Mugabe quote, and we continue with what Lotto wrote. In a message akin disowning the ANC, he said, the ANC are not our friends. They did not take our side in the conflict. This is Mugabe. And he emphasized that he only allowed two offices, one or two non-military members of the ANC, to reside in Zimbabwe, and that most of what were said to be ANC offices were in fact residences. These efforts by the Zimbabwean government were also partly to dispel the notion that some of the sabotage incidences experienced by South Africa at the time had been organized by ANC units operating from Zimbabwe. This escalation of rhetoric by both sides unsettled the British, who feared it would foment a military confrontation. Sometimes the South Africans pointed to the presence of MK fighters in Matebeleland. The British explained that such few elements had no connection with the Zimbabwe government, but with the PF-ZAP. Some ZIPRA members were yet to be disarmed and still controlled and enslaved in the Gwai region, which, in policing terms, was beyond the reach of the state. Having historically worked together during Zimbabwe's liberation war, some ANC cadres were still embedded in its units. This is clear that there was no relationship between the ANC and the ZANU-PF, and that the Zimbabwean government did not assist the ANC or MK post-Zimbabwe's independence, because the apartheid regime had expected that Abel Muzorewa was going to win the elections in Zimbabwe in 1980, but they had to accept the reality that Mugabe had won, or ZANU had won elections in 1980, and they sought to work with the ZANU-PF, as demonstrated in the thesis by Lord Nkomo, and also journalist Peter Fabricius elaborates on this point, that in 1983, indeed, there were meetings between the current president, Emerson Mnangagwa, and the apartheid security forces. These meetings were discussing the possibility or the plan to ensure that the MK did not operate military bases in Zimbabwe. And Rutendo Matinyarare argues, he claims without any evidence that indeed Zimbabwe fought a war in Matebeleland, and he wants to say Gukurahundi, which we all know that Gukurahundi was an ethnic genocide. He wants to portray it as a war against Super ZAPU to advance the struggle for national liberation in South Africa. And Peter, journalist Peter Fabricius, in his article that he published recently, he quotes the minutes of the 1983 meeting in which Emerson attended, and I quote, he says, "Zimbabwe does not consider political support of the ANC in the same category as military support. For this reason, they provide office facilities to the ANC in Harare, but do not allow them to infiltrate over the South Africa and Zimbabwe border," close quote. So that was the context of the discussion, that the ANC should not have operated a basis in Zimbabwe, but the ANC should only have operated political offices, not military offices, as is being portrayed. So what Rutendo is raising does not have any evidence. He's just speaking something which does not exist, trying to take credit of the relationship between ZIPRA and MK. Also, Timothy Scanesia, a history professor at Kent University, in his paper, Rationalizing Gukurahundi, Cold War and South African Foreign Relations with Zimbabwe, in 1981 to 1983, This obviously contradicts what the three presidents of the ANC, that is President Zuma, President Mbeki, and President Ramaphosa, had said when Mugabe died, when they had numerous rallies across KZN to pay tribute to Mugabe, where I will quote what Ramaphosa had said. He said, I quote, Mugabe was a friend of the ANC, a friend of the people of South Africa, who stood by us during our darkest hour and was unwavering in support when our people were suffering under the yoke of apartheid. Because this obviously is not correct. It is not true. The evidence does not point to what President Ramaphosa says. And there's also a video by a former president of South Africa, President Mbeki. Again, he paints this picture of the Zimbabwean government having supported the ANC, which Timothy Scanesia, a history professor at Kanti, also dismisses because there's no evidence that point to any support by the ANC, by the ZANU-PF government towards the ANC between 1980 to at least 1990, because the only thing that happened at the time, that was 1989, is only the signing of the Harare Declaration. And all this happened after the signing of the UNITA Accord in 1980. So Timothy Kanesia also elaborates on the meeting between President Emerson Mnangagwa and the apartheid security chiefs that happened, which obviously this meeting was also suggesting that there was collaboration between the Zimbabwean government and the apartheid state in ensuring that the ANC does not, or the MK does not have military camps in Zimbabwe. And in his history, in his paper, titled External Mission, the ANC in Exile, Stephen Ellis recalls that the National Party in Pretoria, as I have pointed out, thought that Muzorewa was going to win the election, but obviously they were shocked. Muzorewa did not win the elections. They had to work with the ZANU, which had won the election. But what is striking, which is critical in the paper that Stephen Ellis raises, is the attitude of the communists and the ANC when ZANU was declared the winner in 1980. And I'm sure comrades have also read The Story of My Life by Dr. Joshua Nkomo, the former leader of ZAPU, the late deputy president of Zimbabwe, when he chronicles in his book how Lord Soames turned a blind eye to massive intimidation that was happening in the ZANU by ZANLA across the country. And this is captured in the minutes of 18 April 1980 by the SACP when it met in Lusaka to critique or to analyze the 1980 Zimbabwe elections. And I quote what Ellis writes in his paper. He says, quote, initial reactions from the ANC and the SACP were almost as negative as in Pretoria, as they had hoped for a victory of their allies in ZAPU. South African communists were at first inclined to regard Mugabe's victory as conspiracy with international capital, not by collusion with but later on, in its analysis, the SSCP then came to this conclusion that that the victory was not by collusion with international imperialism, but a ruthless use of intimidation across the countryside, which then in turn took an ethnic dimension. The 1980 elections took an ethnic dimension, and Stephen Ellis, in his paper, External Mission, the ANC in Exile, then he says that according to his study, 70% of the population was of Shona speaking and 20% of the population was Ndebele speaking, and that is up won in areas which were dominated by the Matebele or the Ndebele, and the ZANU won areas dominated by the Shona. And we then see Gukurahundi taking an ethnic dimension in Matebeleland, deployed in Matebeleland specifically to block the military corridor, because what needs to be understood, which Rutendo Matinyarare does not understand and will not understand, is that we all know that in 1967, when MK and the Zipra fought together, they moved in Wankebeck and Isipolilo Bekis. They moved from Zambia through Matebeleland. And the plan was for the MK to proceed to South Africa. This, of course, as we all know, it did not happen because of the contact that they had with the Rhodesians, the arrest of Comrade Chrisani and others who were later detained in Botswana. But what is key, which must be understood, that was then known as a military corridor for MK cadres who were coming from Zambia, seeking to use that corridor to infiltrate South Africa. So the deployment of Gukurahundi along that military corridor in Matebeleland North in 1983, it actually blocked that military corridor and made it difficult for the MK to make any move, which Rutendo Matinyarare says he wants to portray it as a collaboration between MK and the Zimbabwean government in fighting against the Super ZAP. But he does not say that which comrade, the late Comrade Dabengwa and Jerim Brickhill also elaborate that after 1980 elections, MK units were inside Zipra units in the assembly point in Zezane, just outside the Bedbridge. Rutendo will not say that. And the other MK cadres that were then discovered to have been inside Zimbabwe within the structures of Zipra were deported back to Zambia. And then Rutendo wants to claim that the Zimbabwean government fought side by side with MK against the apartheid regime. And the claims that Gukurahundi was a war, a war in Zimbabwe, and the Super ZAP was sponsored by imperialist forces. Therefore, the Zimbabwean government, MK, fought against Super ZAP as they sought to liberate South Africa. A naked lie. So this is why we want to challenge this, because as I said, we thought it was not necessary really to be following someone, because if we were taught that if you are bathing, some of us who grew up in the village, if you are bathing in a stream, a mad person comes, pick up your clothes, run to the village, and if you follow him running naked, people, they will think that it is you who's mad. But the problem in keeping quiet is that Rutendo has been repeating this lie, and the repeated lie to some becomes the truth. So it is important that we set the record straight, and we understand that Gukurahundi was an ethnic genocide against the people of Matebeleland and the parts of Midlands. And the reason why we're saying parts of Midlands is that Midlands is split into two. There's an area where there's Ndebele speaking and an area where there's Shona speaking. So part of the area which is occupied by the Ndebele speaking is where there was Gukurahundi. So the late Dr. Dabengwa said this in 2019 in Rivonia at the Lily's farm. Let me quote. ZANU were openly hostile towards the ANC at that time. That was in the 80s. And they were assisted in their efforts to block the ANC MK presence in Zimbabwe by former Rhodesians and the main African agents, South African agents operating in the Zimbabwean security services. Prime Minister Mugabe had publicly stated his opposition to Umkhonto weSizwe establishing any presence in Zimbabwe at close quote. We all know that the late Dr. Tabengwa was we called him Black Russian, was the head of the ZAPU intelligence. And this is what he says about the attitude of the Zimbabwean government. And we know the pain that he went through together with the late commander of ZIPRA, Lookout Masungu, when he was arrested by the Zimbabwean government, kept in prison for years. And the commander, General Lookout Masungu, died in prison. Let me also quote what Comrade Jeremy Prickhill says about Comrade Jeremy Prickhill is the former ZIPRA commander as well. Let me quote what he says. Quote, those members of the ANC and the MK who operated from Zimbabwe during this period know that it was trusted ZAP and ZIPRA members who arranged their safe houses, safe passage, and provided weapons and the other facilities to support the armed strike inside South Africa. It was not ZANU, close quote. And the former president Thabo Mbeki tells us in the video that is circulating all over social media that in his meetings with the former president of the ANC, O. Aratam, when they met Mugabe, Mugabe agreed that the Zimbabwe military was going to transport military hardware from Harare to Limpopo. So for the MK to infiltrate South Africa, there is no evidence of such. And we wish that former President Mbeki will provide us with such evidence. Scholars and revolutionaries, as I have quoted, have seen no such evidence where the Zimbabwean government supported MK during its struggle against apartheid. And in fact, had ZAP won the elections, MK was going to open military bases inside Zimbabwe. So part of the collaboration between Margaret Thatcher and the South Africans was to block a ZAP victory in 1980. As I've already alluded to, the attitude of the governor, Lord Soames, in 1980, when he turned a blind eye to numerous complaints that were raised by the leadership of ZAP in terms of the conduct of ZANU guerrillas who were killing anyone in Manicaland, in Mashonaland West, in Maswingo, who was ZAP. So while Gukurahundi, as an ethnic cleansing genocide, started in 1983, but the killing of political opponents, which comrades in Mashonaland West say it was Gukurahundi, started in 1979, in 1980, in the build-up to the 1980 elections, which the SACP, which was headquartered in Zambia at the time, said that it was massive intimidation that handed ZANU victory. But of course, we know that the split in 1963 was engineered by imperialists, as we have said previously, that ZANU was created as an imperialist project. And they have said that is David Sterling, as a British intelligence officer who led the Capricorn Society, was instrumental in splitting ZAP in 1963 and mobilized some intellectuals within ZANU, within ZAP in 1963, who then split and formed ZANU in 1963 in August to curtail the influence of communists in the region. So a party that is formed as a project of imperialists cannot engage in the struggle against imperialism. It is only Mugabe, when he had been dumped, just like Mobutu Sese Seko of Zaire was dumped by his handlers. When he was dumped, when he had gone to support Laurent Desire Kabila in the Congo War, it was then that the imperialists dumped Mugabe, because the imperialists have no friends. But to his credit, I've never agreed with Mugabe on anything. But to his credit, he did put together an oiled propaganda machinery and won over the developing world to his side, and portrayed himself from the chaotic land reform program as a soldier against imperialists. The whole of Africa, the whole of Latin America supported Mugabe, because he assembled together an old propaganda machinery as led by Professor Jonathan Moy. The so-called Second Republic and the ZANU PF under Emerson Mnangagwa relies on dubious characters to drive its propaganda machinery. And one of those is Rutendo Matinyarare, who, through his actions and advocate Simba Chitando, have isolated ZANU-PF and Zimbabwe from the rest of the progressive forces in the region, in Africa, and in the developing world. Let me conclude by what retired Major General of the retired Major of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces said, that is Ivan Sibona. He was interviewed by Zenzele Ndebele, who runs a media house in Bulawayo. He was a Zipra commander at the time. He was deployed to be in charge of the ZAN assembly point, which is just outside the Bed Bridge. This is what he told Zenzele and Ndebele that in his interview, that there were amongst the Zipra cadres in the camp in Zezani, there were 112 ANC guerrillas, that is ANC guerrillas, MK guerrillas that were there. The intelligence, the Central Intelligence Organization, then picked it up that in Zezani camp there were MK cadres. When he was asked, that is called Major Sibona, Ivan Sibona, when he was asked about the number, he did not say 112, he said 84. And all those 84 MK cadres were transferred to Zambia, back to the ANC head office. They were not allowed to be in Zimbabwe. But when it was then again discovered that there were others had remained inside, they were also deported. And this is also collaborated by Stephen Ellens, whom we've quoted earlier, that in 1980, we all know that ZANU released from prison 32 MK soldiers who were arrested in 1967, but when they were released, they were deported to Zambia. So, and those that were then kept under the radar within these ZIPRA structures in Zimbabwe after 1980, were indeed, as I've quoted, assisted by ZIPRA. It was not by the Zimbabwean government. It was by ZIPRA cadres who provided them with safe houses, who provided them with weapons, who I know one of my leaders, whom I will not name, used to tell me that he was a lecturer in Bulawayo. He will, over the weekends, when he was not going to class, he will be assisting MK cadres in transporting weapons across Limpopo. This obviously was done clandestinely, because if you were they were caught by the Zimbabwean regime, they were going to be arrested. So in conclusion, we must then draw lessons from what America Cabral says, that we should not claim easy victories and we should not tell lies. And this is what Rutendo seeks to do. And we should not keep quiet when such blunted lies are said out there. So ZANU PF, through its new members who are now part of its propaganda machinery, are trying to portray ZANU as a true revolutionary movement that fought alongside the revolutionaries in the strike against the oppression and the strike against the apartheid. Please write your views. Circulate this video. Want to hear from yourselves. I see comrading Langeli Hlemtembo says, I used to listen to guys supporting ZANU all corners. Well, that's what happens. So thank you so much, comrade. Please subscribe, circulate the video, write your comments. Bye-bye.